The silent healer was not sent into the blood forest because she failed to save the noble heir. She was sent because she could not defend herself when they blamed her for his death. Lyra knelt on the black stone steps outside the eastern gate of Valehold, her wrists bound in silver vine, her healer's dress torn at the hem, her throat marked by the pale scar that had stolen her voice when she was a child. Snow fell over the court, but beyond the open gate, the blood forest waited without winter. Its trees were black, its leaves were red, its roots moved when no wind touched them. No woman sent inside had ever returned. The nobles had gathered to watch her exile as if it were a festival. Wolf lords stood beneath dark banners. Temple healers wore white masks. Guards held torches that burned blue against the red mist crawling from the forest mouth. At the top of the steps, Alpha King Ronan Vale stood in black armor, his wolf fur mantle heavy across his shoulders, his gray-gold eyes fixed on Lyra, with the cold distance of a man who had already turned a life into law. Beside him stood Lady Kalira Voss, the royal healer. Beautiful, pale, untouched by blood. Her silver hair was braided with tiny moonbone pins, and her hands were folded neatly over the medicine satchel at her waist, the same satchel Lyra had seen beside the dying heir's bed before the boy's lips turned black. Lord Fenrick's heir had been 15, too young to die, too noble for the court to accept an ordinary fever. So they needed poison. They needed guilt. They needed someone who could not speak. Lady Kalira lifted the blood-stained cloth from the dead boy's chamber. This was found beneath Lyra's pallet. A murmur moved through the court. Lyra shook her head once. No. The word lived in her chest. It never reached her mouth. Kalira looked down at her with soft sorrow. I wish she could answer. Truly, I do. But silence has always been convenient for girls with secrets. Lyra's fingers curled against the stone. She had no voice, but she had hands. Hands that had stitched wounds, set bones, held fevered children through the night, pressed herbs into dying mouths, prayed without sound when prayer was all she had left. Those hands were now tied like a criminal's. Alpha King Ronan stepped forward. Lyra of the lower healing ward, you were ordered to save Lord Fenrick's heir. Lyra lifted her eyes to him. She remembered his face from the sick room. Not the king's face he wore now. The other one. The face he had shown when the boy stopped breathing. For one moment, Ronan had looked stricken. Not cruel, not distant. Almost desperate. As if the death had touched a fear he kept locked beneath his ribs. Then Kalira had whispered in his ear, and the king became stone. You failed, Ronan said. Lyra shook her head again, harder. No. She reached toward the pouch at her belt, but a guard struck her hand away. Inside that pouch was the root she had pulled from the boy's tongue after he died. Blackthorn root. Blood forest root. Not medicine. A curse. Someone had placed it in the heir's mouth before Lyra entered the room. Kalira knew. Lyra had seen her watching. But a mute girl's truth was only movement. And movement could be called panic. Lady Kalira stepped closer. Your Majesty, the law is clear. A healer who cannot defend her work before witness must be judged by the old forest. The old forest. The court went silent. Ronan's jaw tightened. Only slightly. Lyra saw it. The king did not like this, but he would still allow it. That hurt more than hatred. Lord Fenrick, the dead boy's father, stood with a face carved by grief. Let the forest take her. If she is innocent, the roots will spare her. No one believed that. Not even him. Ronan looked at Lyra. Do you deny the charge? The cruelty of the question struck the courtyard cold. A few nobles lowered their eyes. Lyra stared at him. Then she opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Only breath. Only the old scar, tightening across her throat like a hand. Kalira's expression softened. She cannot. Lyra slowly raised her bound hands and signed. I did not kill him. The court watched. Blank. No one there knew the hand language of the lower wards. No one except... Ronan's eyes flickered. He knew. Lyra saw it. The Alpha King understood her. For one heartbeat, hope burned so sharply it almost felt like pain. Then Ronan looked away. Kalira saw that too. Her mouth curved faintly. The blood forest will hear what we cannot, she said. The guards pulled Lyra to her feet. The eastern gate opened wider. Red mist spilled across the stones and wrapped around her ankles. Every wolf in the courtyard stepped back. Even Ronan's black war wolf, standing near the steps, lowered its head and growled not at Lyra, but at the forest. Lyra was pushed forward. One step, then another. At the threshold, she looked back at Ronan. She did not beg. She only signed one last time. "You understood me." The words hit him. She saw it in his face. Not enough to save her. Enough to haunt him. Then the guards shoved her through the gate. The blood forest swallowed her in red mist. The court waited. It always waited. The forest usually screamed before it killed. Lyra stumbled between the black trees, breath shaking, wrists burning against the silver vine. The ground beneath her feet was warm, wet, rooted with things that pulsed like veins. Behind her, the gate remained open. The court wanted to watch. Ronan had followed to the threshold. Kalira stood beside him. Lyra could feel their eyes on her back. The first root moved. It slid from the red soil and curled around her ankle. She froze. Another root rose. Then another. The nobles leaned forward. Kalira whispered, "It begins." Lyra closed her eyes. She waited for pain. Instead, the root loosened her binding. The silver vine around her wrists snapped. Gasps erupted from the gate. Lyra opened her eyes. The trees around her bent. Slowly, massive trunks lowering like ancient wolves bowing their heads. The red leaves turned silver at the edges. And through the roots beneath the earth came a whisper. Not one voice. Hundreds. Lyra. The court fell silent. Ronan stepped into the red mist before anyone could stop him. The forest whispered again, louder this time. Nerissa Vale. Lady Kalira's face went white. Lyra looked down, as the roots curled gently around her bare feet, not trapping her, but recognizing her. Then the largest tree in the forest split open. Inside its hollow trunk was a woman's skeleton wrapped in healer's white, a silver crown of roots around her skull, and a blackthorn root still buried in her mouth. Ronan stopped beside Lyra, his sword half drawn. The forest spoke through every tree at once. "Daughter of the first root, why did they bring your mother's murderer to our gate?" Ronan stepped into the blood forest as if walking into his own execution. The red mist closed behind him. Every wolf at the gate went silent. Lyra stood among the bowed trees, free of her silver vine bonds, staring at the skeleton inside the hollow trunk. The woman had been dead for years, maybe longer. Her healer's white robes had rotted into gray threads. Roots curled through her ribs. A crown of living silver roots wrapped her skull, and in her mouth sat the same blackthorn root Lyra had pulled from the noble heir's tongue. The forest spoke again. "Daughter of the first root, why did they bring your mother's murderer to our gate?" Lyra could not move. "Mother." The word struck a place inside her deeper than memory. She had never known her mother's face. She had been told the woman died fevered and nameless in the lower wards. No grave. No history. No blessing. Only a scar on Lyra's throat and a life of silence. Ronan's sword was half drawn. Not at Lyra. At the forest. "Who murdered her?" he demanded. The trees bent lower. Their leaves whispered with hundreds of voices. "The one who sealed the child's voice. The one who fed root to the air. The one who stands at your gate wearing a healer's face." Lady Kalira. At the threshold, the royal healer went pale. Only for a second. Then she lifted her chin. "Your Majesty, the forest lies. It is forbidden ground. It twists grief into accusation." Lyra turned toward her. For years, Kalira had touched her scar and said pitying things. Poor silent child, poor broken healer, poor girl with no voice to defend her hands. Now, Lyra understood. The woman had not pitied her silence. She had trusted it. Ronan looked back through the mist at Kalira. "Did you know her mother was here?" Kalira's eyes sharpened. "Do not let the forest speak through a mute girl and call it truth." Lyra's hands shook. She lifted them and signed. She killed the heir. The court watched blankly. Ronan did not. His jaw tightened. Kalira saw his understanding and smiled faintly. "Convenient, is it not? The girl who cannot speak suddenly has a forest to speak for her." Ronan turned to Lyra. "Show me." The command burned. Lyra's eyes hardened. She signed slowly. "Do not command me." Something flickered across his face. Guilt? No, not enough. Not yet. He lowered his voice. "Then let me witness." That was different. Not apology, not trust, but less cruel than before. Lyra looked at the skeleton in the tree. The roots around it pulsed like veins. The blackthorn root in her mother's mouth trembled. She stepped closer. The forest held its breath. Ronan moved with her, close enough to protect, not close enough to touch. His wolf shadow dragged behind him in the red mist, limping slightly. Lyra noticed. The king's wolf was wounded, not in flesh, in root. Black veins curled beneath the shadow's paws, vanishing into the soil. The blood forest knew him too. Lyra reached toward the blackthorn root in the skeleton's mouth. Ronan caught her wrist. "Do not touch it." She glared at him. He released her at once. His voice was rough. "That root is in my wolf." Lyra froze. Ronan's face closed, but too late. She had seen the truth. The Alpha King was not untouched by the forest. He was infected by it, dying slowly beneath armor and command. Kalira's voice cut from the gate. "Your Majesty, step away from her." Ronan ignored her. Lyra pulled the blackthorn root free. The forest screamed. A vision opened in the red mist. A younger Kalira stood beneath these same trees, dragging a woman in healer's robes by the hair. The woman's throat had been cut, but not deeply enough to kill. Beside her stood a little girl, Lyra, crying without sound, hands pressed to her bleeding neck. Kalira knelt before the child and whispered, "A voice like yours would ruin kingdoms." Then she placed blackthorn root in the mother's mouth. The woman's body arched. The trees screamed. Kalira turned to the child and pressed 2 fingers to Lyra's throat. Silver light flashed. Lyra's voice vanished. The vision shifted. Lord Fenric's heir lying in bed. Kalira leaning over him before Lyra entered. A black root pressed beneath the boy's tongue. A poison that looked like sickness. A murder waiting for a mute healer to be blamed. The vision broke. The court at the gate erupted. Lord Fenric staggered forward. "No." Kalira's calm cracked. "Illusion." Ronan's sword fully left its sheath. "Do not speak." The royal healer stepped back. For the first time, fear touched her face. Then she lifted her hand. The silver pins in her hair turned black. Roots burst from the ground at the gate, wrapping around the nobles, guards, and Lord Fenric. Screams tore through the courtyard. Kalira's voice sharpened. "The forest does not belong to her. It belongs to whoever holds the first wound." She sliced her own palm. Black blood fell into the roots. The bowed trees twisted. Their branches snapped upright. Lyra stumbled as pain ripped through her throat. The old scar burned. Ronan moved in front of her, sword raised. She shoved him aside. He looked stunned. She signed one word. "No." She would not hide behind the king who had let them throw her into death. The forest shook harder. Kalira smiled. "Still silent, little root?" Lyra pressed the blackthorn root from her mother's mouth against her own scar. Ronan's eyes widened. "Lyra, don't." She did. Pain exploded through her throat. Not a scream, a memory. Her mother's hands. Warm, bloody, desperate. Hide her name. Seal her voice. Lit her live. The forest bent toward Lyra again, fighting Kalira's blood command. Ronan turned toward the gate and roared, "Cut the roots from the court!" His wolf shadow lunged, tearing through black vines even as the root curse burned deeper into its paws. Lyra saw him stagger. He would die if he kept fighting the forest with force. She stepped past him and placed both hands on the ground, the roots wrapped around her wrists. Gentle, waiting. Every tree whispered her name. Nerissa Vale, daughter of the first root, last voice of the living forest. The scar across her throat split open in silver light. For the first time since childhood, sound rose inside her. Small, broken, terrible. Stop. The word was barely a whisper, but the entire blood forest obeyed. Every root froze. Every black vine released its prey. Every wolf at the gate fell to its knees. Kalira stared in horror. Ronan turned slowly toward Lyra, his face stripped of command. Lyra touched her throat, trembling. The forest whispered through the leaves. "She has spoken." Then the skeleton in the hollow tree opened its jaw and spoke with her mother's voice. Run, child. The healer did not come alone. Behind Kalira, the eastern ground split open, and from beneath the roots rose a pack of dead wolves with blackthorn in their mouths. The dead wolves rose from beneath the blood forest, with blackthorn roots clenched between their jaws. The court screamed, not because the wolves were dead, because they were wearing royal collars. Silver collars, noble collars, war collars, the kind given to loyal guards, honored scouts, and sons of great houses who died defending Valehold. Except these wolves had not died in battle. They had been buried under the roots. Lyra stood frozen with one hand at her bleeding throat, the word she had spoken still burning inside her chest. Stop. One word, one broken whisper, and the forest had obeyed. Now the dead were answering too. Ronan stepped beside her, sword raised, his face carved with fury. His wolf shadow limped at his feet, black veins spreading through its paws from the root curse. Lady Kalira stood at the gate, pale but smiling. You should have stayed silent, she said. The first dead wolf opened its jaws. The blackthorn root fell onto the snow. Then it spoke with a man's voice. Ronan. The Alpha King went still. Lyra saw the name strike him harder than the forest had. Another dead wolf stepped forward. Then another. Their hollow eyes glowed red beneath the mist. Ronan's sword lowered slightly. No. Kalira's smile sharpened. Yes. Your lost border guard. Your missing scouts. Your uncle's sons. Your mother's escort. Every wolf you were told deserted the crown. Every wolf the blood forest was blamed for taking. The dead wolves turned their heads toward Kalira. They did not obey her. Not fully, but blackthorn roots still pierced their mouths, forcing them forward. Lyra looked at the roots. The same poison that killed Lord Fenric's heir. The same root buried in her mother's mouth. The same curse eating Ronan's wolf. Kalira had not only framed her, she had been feeding the forest for years. Ronan understood it too. You used them, he said. I preserved them, Kalira replied. Valehold needed fear. Fear keeps packs behind walls. Fear keeps kings dependent on healers who know which roots can kill and which roots can hide the bodies. A dead wolf lunged. Ronan shoved Lyra back and met it with his blade. Steel struck bone. Sparks flew. The wolf did not bleed. It only staggered, then rose again, blackthorn twisting in its throat. Lyra grabbed Ronan's arm. He looked at her, breathing hard. She pointed to the root in the wolf's mouth. Do not cut the body. Cut the root. He understood. This time, when the wolf lunged, Ronan twisted aside and sliced the blackthorn from its jaws. The dead wolf collapsed. Its body dissolved into red leaves. A man's voice whispered, Witness. The forest sigh hid. Lyra's throat burned. She knew what it wanted. Not battle. Names. The dead wolves did not need to be killed. They needed to be heard. Kalira saw the realization and raised her bleeding hand. Tear them apart. The dead wolves surged toward the gate, toward the court, toward Lord Fenric, who stood shaking beneath the banners, staring at the truth of his son's murder and the army of buried dead behind it. Lyra stepped forward. Ronan caught her wrist. No. The word was command again. Her eyes cut to him. He released her instantly. His jaw tightened. I cannot lose another person to this forest. She signed, then stopped trying to own the danger. The words hit him. He had no answer. Good. Lyra walked between the dead wolves and the court. Every root beneath the ground shifted toward her like listening veins. Her mother's skeleton watched from the hollow tree, jaw open, silver root crown glowing. Lyra opened her mouth. Pain tore through the scar. No sound came at first. Kalira laughed. One word does not make a voice. Lyra pressed both hands to the earth. The forest spoke with her. Name. The dead wolves froze. The first wolf turned its hollow eyes toward Ronan. The Alpha King went pale. He knew this one. Ronan stepped forward, voice rough. Gareth Vale, captain of my mother's guard. The blackthorn root in the wolf's mouth cracked. The next wolf looked toward an old noblewoman on the terrace. She began to sob. My son, Dain Oros. Another root cracked, then another. Names rose from the court. Marek, Zolan, Ver, Thomas, Edrin. Wolf after wolf dropped as their names were spoken, their bodies dissolving into leaves, bone, and red light. The court changed as it named them. Fear became grief. Grief became anger. Anger turned toward Kalira. The royal healer stepped back. For the first time, she looked less like a priestess of medicine and more like a woman trapped among the bodies she had hidden. Then one final dead wolf remained. It was larger than the rest, black-furred, silver-collared, roots wrapped so tightly around its jaws that its muzzle had split. Ronan stopped breathing. Lyra looked at him. His face had gone gray. Kalira's smile returned. "Do you recognize him, my king?" The wolf lifted its head, its dead eyes fixed on Ronan. Ronan whispered, "Father." The court went silent. The dead wolf growled through the blackthorn. Ronan's sword trembled in his hand. Lyra felt the forest tighten around them. So this was the root of his curse. Not only poison, not only magic. His father had been buried in the blood forest, and Ronan's wolf had been dying because part of his bloodline was still trapped beneath the roots. Kalira spoke softly. "Your father discovered what the forest hid. He came here to open the graves. I gave him peace before he could bring ruin to the crown." Ronan turned toward her. There was murder in his eyes. Kalira did not flinch. "Kill me, and the root in his mouth stays forever." Ronan froze. The trap closed. Kill the murderer. Lose the father. Spare the murderer. Swallow the rage. Lyra moved toward the dead wolf. Ronan stopped her again, but this time his hand barely touched her sleeve. "Please," he said. Not command. A plea. She looked at him. The Alpha King, who had exiled her now, stood before her with his father's corpse snarling beneath a curse and no power great enough to save him. She signed slowly. "Trust me, or lose him." Ronan's eyes burned. Then he stepped aside. Lyra approached the dead wolf. Its jaws snapped inches from her face, but she did not move back. The root in its mouth pulsed black. Beneath it, something human struggled to breathe. Lyra placed her hand on its muzzle. The dead wolf shuddered. Her throat split with silver pain. This time, the word came stronger. "Wake." The blackthorn root cracked. The wolf collapsed to its knees. Ronan reached forward, but Lyra lifted one hand. Not yet. The dead wolf opened its jaws. A man's voice came out, broken and buried. "Ronan, the healer wears the forest's stolen heart." Kalira screamed. "Silence him!" Roots erupted from the ground and wrapped around Lyra's throat. Ronan lunged, but the forest moved first. Every black tree bent toward Lyra. Every red leaf turned silver. Her mother's skeleton rose inside the hollow trunk, held upright by roots like a queen returning from the grave. The dead father wolf looked at Lyra and spoke one final word. "Crown root." The ground split beneath Kalira, not to kill her, to reveal what she had buried. A living heart of roots beat beneath the eastern gate, wrapped in silver chains, pulsing with stolen voices. Lyra stared at it. Her own lost voice was inside that heart. So was her mother's. So were all the dead. And the blood forest whispered through every tree. "Take back what she stole." The crown root beat beneath the eastern gate, like a heart the kingdom had buried and forgotten how to mourn. Silver chains wrapped around it, each link carved with names. Some were old, some fresh. Some belonged to healers, some to soldiers. Some to children who had vanished into the blood forest and returned only as warnings. Lyra stared at it, unable to breathe. Her voice was inside that heart. She felt it, not as sound, but as an ache. A part of herself stolen so long ago she had mistaken the emptiness for who she was. Beside her, Ronan stood frozen, his sword lowered, his father's dead wolf kneeling before them with blackthorn still cracking from its jaws. Lady Kalira stood at the edge of the split ground, face pale beneath all her beauty. For the first time, she looked afraid of Lyra. Not because Lyra had power, because Lyra had proof. The blood forest whispered through every root. "Take back what she stole." Lyra stepped toward the crown root. Kalira's voice cut like a blade. "Touch it, and every voice inside will tear through you." Lyra stopped. Ronan turned on Kalira. "What is it?" The royal healer lifted her chin, trying to rebuild the mask that had fed on silence for years. "The first wound of the forest, the place where grief becomes language. Your ancestors chained it because a kingdom cannot survive every buried truth speaking at once." "No," Lyra whispered. The words scraped out of her throat. rough and painful. Everyone heard it. Kalira flinched. Lyra touched her scar, stunned by her own sound, then looked at the chained root heart. "No," she said again, stronger. "You chained it because truth would name you." The forest shivered. Ronan looked at her as if the sound of her voice had struck him deeper than any spell. But Lyra did not look at him. Not yet. Her mother's skeleton stood within the hollow tree, held upright by silver roots, jaw open, root crown glowing. The dead healer's voice came through the leaves. "The crown root does not give back gently." Lyra signed without thinking, hands shaking. "Then tell me how." The forest answered in her mother's voice. "Name the first silence." Lyra understood. Not Cairo. Not the dead wolves. Not even the noble air. Herself. She stepped to the edge of the split ground and looked down into the living heart. "My name is Nerissa Vale," she said. The court went silent. Her voice was fragile, but it carried. "I was not born silent." The crown root pulsed. Silver chains rattled. "I was made silent by the woman who murdered my mother, buried the dead beneath this forest, poisoned Lord Fenric's heir, and called my hands guilty because my mouth could not defend them." Kalira's face hardened. A dramatic speech from a girl who learned one word and thinks it makes her holy. Lyra looked at her. "I am not holy." Roots lifted around her wrists. "I am angry." The blood forest answered. Every tree bowed. The chains around the crown root cracked. Kalira lunged. Ronan moved first, blocking her path with his sword. "No more." "You still need me," Kalira hissed. "Your wolf is dying. Your father is trapped. Your court is infected. I am the only one who knows how to hold the root. Curse back." Ronan's eyes went cold. "You are the reason it exists. I am the reason you still stand." "No," he said. "You are the reason I stood in the wrong place." The words hit Lyra, but she did not let herself soften. Not yet. Kalira's hand shot toward the crown root. A black vine burst from her palm and struck Lyra in the throat. Pain dropped her to her knees. Ronan shouted her name. Lyra clawed at the vine, but it was not choking her breath. It was choking her voice. Kalira smiled through terror. "You see? Some girls are safer silent." Ronan lunged, but the dead father wolf blocked him, not attacking, stopping him. The wolf's broken voice rose from its cracked jaws. She must take it herself. Ronan froze. Lyra heard him breathe her name again, lower this time. Not command, not rescue, a plea. She pressed one hand to the black vine at her throat and the other to the ground. The roots answered. Not with power, with memory, her mother holding her as a child. Warm hands around a tiny throat. A whispered promise Lyra had never remembered because it had been stolen with everything else. "If they take your voice, little root, listen deeper. The forest will keep it until you are ready." Lyra stopped fighting the vine. She reached through it, into the crown root. The pain was immediate. Voices flooded her body, her mother's final cry, dead wolves calling for brothers, children begging from under roots, the noble heir gasping as blackthorn filled his mouth. Ronan's father trying to warn his son. Lyra's own childhood scream, trapped for years inside a silver chain. She found that scream. Small, terrified, still alive. She took it into her chest. The black vine around her throat split. Lyra rose. When she opened her mouth, the sound that came out was not loud. It did not need to be. Return. The crown root exploded with silver light. Chains snapped one by one. Voices burst free and rushed into the forest, into the court, into the dead wolves, into Ronan's shadow. The black veins in his wolf shadow burned away in strips. His father's dead wolf collapsed, body dissolving into red leaves and moonlight. Then a man's spirit stood where the wolf had been, tall, wounded, crowned only by grief. Ronan's father looked at his son. "My boy," he said. Ronan dropped to one knee before he could stop himself. The court watched their alpha king kneel in the red mist. But Lyra could not watch long. The crown root was still open, and Kalira was laughing. Softly at first, then louder. "You freed it," she said, eyes bright with madness. "You foolish little root, you freed every voice." The ground shook. Beyond the eastern gate, deeper inside the blood forest, thousands of whispers rose at once. Not all grieving, some hungry. Lyra looked into the trees. The red leaves had turned black. Her mother's skeleton lowered its head. The first root has awakened. Ronan stood, wiping grief from his face like blood. What does that mean? Kalira smiled. It means the forest will no longer wait for names, she whispered. It will take them. The blood forest moved. Every tree turned toward Valehold. And beneath the palace walls, roots began to rise. The blood forest turned toward Valehold. Not slowly, not like trees moved by wind, like an army waking. Roots tore through the red soil and surged toward the palace walls. Black trunks bent forward. Red leaves darkened until the whole forest looked soaked in old blood. Beneath the eastern gate, the freed crown root beat harder, sending silver light through the ground in violent pulses. The court screamed. Nobles fled from the terraces. Guards dragged children away from the gate. Temple healers dropped their white masks and ran. But the roots were faster than fear. They burst beneath the courtyard stones. One wrapped around Lord Fenric's ankle and dragged him down before Ronan cut it free. Another tore through a wolf banner and split the pole in half. More roots rose beneath the palace walls, searching, listening, hungry for every voice ever buried there. Lyra stood at the edge of the blood forest, throat burning, voice newly returned and already raw. She had freed the crown root. Now the forest wanted every name. Lady Kalira smiled through the chaos, blood on her teeth. Do you hear it, little root? That is truth without mercy. Ronan turned on her. Stop it. I cannot. Her eyes shone. She woke it. Lyra looked toward Valehold. The forest was not attacking randomly. It was reaching for the healing wing, the royal crypts, the council chamber, the lower servant dormitories, places where pain had been hidden under stone. Ronan saw it too. His jaw tightened. It is hunting buried voices. Kalira laughed. And when it finds them all, your kingdom will be nothing but roots and bones. Lyra stepped toward the gate. Ronan caught her sleeve, then stopped himself before gripping harder. What are you doing? She looked at the roots tearing through the courtyard. What I started. You can barely stand. I can speak. That does not make you invincible. No, Lyra said. It makes me responsible. The words struck him silent. Behind them, Ronan's father stood as a fading spirit among the red mist, his royal form flickering like moonlight through leaves. He looked at the roots rising beneath Valehold and lowered his head. The forest was never meant to punish the living, he said. It was meant to hold what the dead could not carry. Lyra turned to him. How do I stop it? His eyes moved to Kalira. The one who chained the crown root fed it vengeance. Only the one who freed it can teach it witness. Kalira's smile faded. Lyra understood. The forest did not need silence. It needed direction. She walked toward the courtyard. The roots shifted toward her at once. Ronan moved beside her, sword in hand. Do not stand in front of me, Lyra said. I am not. He stayed beside her. For once, he meant it. The first root lunged. Lyra lifted her hand. Wait. The root froze inches from her face. The court froze with it. The word was quiet, but the forest heard. Lyra stepped onto the broken stones of Valehold's courtyard. Every eye turned to her now, the mute healer they had exiled, the girl they blamed because she could not answer, the woman whose voice had come back carrying the forest behind it. She pointed toward Lord Fenric. His face went pale. The roots moved toward him. Name your son, Lyra said. Fenric trembled. Alden. The roots stopped. Say what happened. He shook his head. I do not know. Lyra's voice hardened. Then say what you know. Fenric swallowed. He was ill. Kalira sent every servant from the room. She said only royal healing could touch him. When Lyra entered, he was already dying. Kalira snapped. Grief makes men invent guilt. The roots turned toward her. Lyra pointed to a young kitchen maid hiding behind a broken pillar. The girl flinched. You carried water that night. The maid began to cry. I saw Lady Kalira burn something in the brazier, a black root. She told me if I spoke, my tongue would feed the forest. The roots pulsed silver. Witness. The word moved through the leaves. Not hunger now. Witness. Lyra turned to the captain of the guard. You sealed the healing wing. He lowered his head. By Kalira's order. Why? She said the heir's death must have one clean cause. Ronan looked at him sharply. The captain could not meet his eyes. One clean cause. one mute healer, one easy body to blame. The forest groaned, but it did not attack. Lyra understood then. Every truth spoken aloud gave the roots what they wanted without blood. Kalira understood too. She lunged toward Lyra with a blackthorn blade. Ronan intercepted her. Their bodies collided hard against the broken gate. Kalira slashed his arm, and black veins shot instantly beneath his skin. Lyra cried his name. Ronan staggered but held Kalira's wrist. "You will not touch her." Kalira smiled up at him. "Still pretending she is only a witness?" Ronan's grip tightened. "No." Lyra went still. Ronan looked over his shoulder at her, pain darkening his eyes. "She is the woman I condemned, because I feared what silence might cost me." The court heard him. So did Lyra. Her chest tightened, but she did not let the feeling soften her too soon. Kalira spat. "How romantic. Will you kneel next?" Ronan turned back to her. "If truth requires it." He drove her to the ground and knocked the blade from her hand. But the blackthorn poison had entered his blood. His wolf shadow collapsed beside him, shaking. Lyra ran to him. This time, he did not tell her no. The curse raced up his arm toward his heart. She pressed both hands over the wound, feeling the forest inside it old, bitter, hungry. This was Kalira's last trap. If Lyra healed him, the poison would enter her. If she did not, his wolf would die before the court he had just defied. Kalira laughed from the stones. "Choose, healer." Lyra looked at Ronan. He was pale now, but his voice stayed low. "Do not trade your life for mine." She almost smiled. He was learning far too late. "I am not trading," she whispered. "I am listening." She closed her eyes and pressed her ear to his chest. Not to his heart, to his wolf. Beneath the poison, beneath the curse, beneath years of command, she heard a howl trapped in roots. Ronan's wolf was not dying. It was bound around a name. Lyra opened her eyes. "Who did Kalira make you forget?" Ronan froze. The forest went silent. Kalira's laughter stopped. Lyra looked at him again. "There is a name in your wolf." Ronan's lips parted. No sound came. For the first time, the Alpha King looked as voiceless as she had been. His father's spirit whispered from the trees. "Your brother." Ronan staggered. The roots beneath the palace split open. A second grave rose from under the council chamber. Inside lay a young man in royal armor, blackthorn roots wrapped around his throat, one hand still clutching a broken wolf crown. Ronan stared at the body. His voice broke. "Jael." Kalira closed her eyes. "Too late." The blood forest whispered through every root in Valehold. "The Forgotten Prince has been named." The Forgotten Prince had been named. The blood forest stopped moving. Every root beneath Valehold froze in place, wrapped around walls, gates, banners, and stone, waiting for the kingdom to understand what had just risen from beneath its own council chamber. Ronan stood before the open grave, staring down at the body in royal armor. Jael, his brother. The name had come from his mouth like blood. The dead prince lay half-buried in roots, one hand still gripping a broken wolf crown. His face was pale beneath the blackthorn wrapped around his throat, but he had not rotted. The forest had kept him whole, as if waiting for someone to remember he had ever existed. Ronan's sword slipped from his hand. "I had no brother," he whispered. His father's spirit stood beneath the red trees, grief carved into every line of his fading face. "You did." The words struck the court harder than any root. Nobles looked at one another in fear. Guards lowered their weapons. Lord Fenric crossed himself with shaking fingers. Even the wolves stopped growling. Lyra remained beside Ronan, one hand still pressed near the blackthorn wound on his arm. She could feel his wolf trembling inside him, not from poison now, but from memory clawing back through years of stolen silence. Kalira lay on the broken stones, bound by roots at wrists and throat. Her face had gone still. Too still. Lyra turned toward her. "What did you do to him?" Kalira smiled faintly. "I saved the throne from two heirs." Ronan looked at her slowly. The cold that entered his face frightened even the forest. Kalira continued, voice soft, almost tender. "Kael was older, stronger, loved by the border packs. Your father wanted him crowned. But Kael trusted the forest, trusted healers, trusted low-born witnesses. He would have opened every buried grave before he ever wore the crown. Ronan's father closed his eyes. Ronan's voice was barely sound. "So you killed him?" "No," Kalira said. "I removed him. Then I removed your memory of him. A king cannot mourn a brother he does not remember." Lyra's throat burned. She knew that cruelty. A stolen voice, a stolen name, a stolen grief. Different wounds, same hand. Ronan took one step toward Kalira, but the roots tightened around her before he could reach her. The blood forest spoke through Lyra's mother's bones. Not blood, witness. Ronan stopped. His jaw worked as if every instinct in him wanted violence, and every truth he had just learned demanded something harder. He looked at Lyra. For the first time, the Alpha King did not ask what he should do. He waited. Lyra stepped toward Kael's grave. The blackthorn around the dead prince's throat pulsed. His name had been spoken, but the root still held him, not alive, not free. She knelt beside him and placed her fingers on the broken wolf crown. A vision opened. Kael stood in the council chamber years ago, young and fierce, arguing with Kalira while Ronan, barely more than a boy, waited outside the doors. "The forest is not a monster," Kael said. "It is a grave, and if we keep feeding it prisoners, it will one day feed on us." Kalira's face in the vision was calm. "You sound like the mute healer's mother." She was right. She is dead, and still more honest than this council. Then Kalira lifted a cup. Not to him, to Ronan outside the door. Young Ronan drank without knowing. His eyes glazed. Inside the chamber, black roots burst from the floor and wrapped around Kael's throat. He fought. He almost broke free. Then Kalira whispered, "Let your brother forget you, and he will live." Kael stopped fighting. The roots dragged him under the stone. His last word was Ronan. The vision shattered. Lyra fell back, gasping. Ronan caught her by the shoulders, then released her the moment she steadied herself. "What did you see?" he asked. Lyra looked at him. "He chose your life over being remembered." Ronan's face broke. Not loudly, not beautifully, just enough that the court saw the man beneath the crown lose a brother twice in one breath. Kalira hissed, "Do not make him noble. He was a threat." Ronan turned toward her. "He was my blood. He was your rival. He was my brother." The forest answered with a low silver hum. The blackthorn around Kael's throat cracked. Lyra touched it again. This time, she did not pull. She spoke. "Kael Vale, first heir of Valehold, brother of Ronan, buried by Kalira Voss, forgotten by spell, remembered by blood." The root snapped. Kael's body dissolved into red leaves and pale light. A spirit rose from the grave. Young, tall, silver-eyed. Ronan stared at him like a starving man seeing bread. Kael smiled sadly. "You always looked so angry when you were afraid." Ronan made a broken sound. The brothers stood facing each other with 10 stolen years between them. Then Kael looked at Lyra. "She has your voice?" Lyra nodded. "She has more than that," Ronan's father said from the trees. "She has the forest's choice." Kalira began to laugh again. Everyone turned. "Choice?" she whispered. "You still do not understand. The forest does not choose. It remembers, and now it remembers too much." The crown root beneath the gate pulsed violently. Every grave under Valehold answered. Not one. Hundreds. The ground under the palace cracked open in lines of silver and red. Names rose from beneath kitchens, stables, towers, chapels, walls, servants, guards, healers, children, rivals, brides, prisoners. Every person Kalira and the council had fed to silence. The forest wanted all of them named. Now, Lyra staggered as the voices rushed toward her throat. Ronan caught her before she fell. "Lyra." She clutched his armor, trying to breathe. Too many names, too much grief. Her voice had been returned, but it was not wide enough to carry a kingdom's dead. Kalira's eyes gleamed. "There, that is the price. Let her speak them all, and the dead will tear her open. Refuse, and the forest takes Valehold by root and bone." Ronan looked at the rising names, then at Lyra, then at the court. His face changed. He understood. This was not her burden alone. He stepped away from her and turned toward the nobles, guards, servants, and healers gathered in terror. "Every name you know," Ronan said. "Speak it." No one moved. His voice thundered. "Now." Lord Fenric was first. "My son, Alden." The kitchen maid followed, crying. "Mira of the lower ovens." A guard dropped to one knee. "Harrow, West Patrol." A noblewoman covered her mouth. "Lysa, my sister." One by one, the court began to speak. Names filled the courtyard. The roots slowed. Lyra breathed. For the first time, Valehold did not force one silent girl to carry its dead. The kingdom spoke with her. Kalira screamed. The roots around her body tightened, not killing her, holding her still as every name she had buried rose beyond her control. Then Kael's spirit turned toward Lyra. "The first silence has been named," he said, "but the first wound remains." Lyra looked toward the blood forest. Deep inside the black trees, something opened its eyes. Her mother's skeleton bowed its root-crowned head, and the forest whispered, "Bring Kalira to the first tree." The blood forest wanted Kalira brought to the first tree. No one moved at first. The request passed through the roots like a sentence older than law. Bring Kalira to the first tree. Not kill her. Not bury her. Bring her. That was worse, somehow. Death could be quick. The forest wanted witness. Lady Kalira Voss stood bound in silver roots at the broken eastern gate, her perfect healer's face stripped of calm. For the first time, she looked not like a woman who controlled death, but like someone who had remembered she could be judged by it. Ronan looked at Lyra. "What is the first tree?" Lyra did not know, but her mother's skeleton, still standing inside the hollow trunk near the forest mouth, turned its root-crowned skull toward the deeper woods. "The first wound," her mother's voice whispered through the leaves. "The place where the forest learned to keep what kings refused to hear." Kalira laughed, but the sound cracked. "You cannot take me there." Ronan stepped toward her. "Why?" Her eyes flashed. "Because if the first tree opens, your throne will hear its own beginning." That silenced the court. Ronan's brother, Kael, stood as a pale spirit beside the open grave. Their father's spirit waited beneath the red trees. Around them, the court kept whispering names, softly now, fearfully feeding truth into the roots so the forest would not tear the palace apart. Lyra felt each name pass through the ground. But beneath them all was a deeper pulse. The first tree, waiting. Ronan looked at his guards. Unbind her from the gate. No one stepped forward. The roots answered instead. They loosened from the broken stone and wrapped around Kalira's wrists like living chains. She tried to pull back, but the blood forest dragged her one step forward. Then another. Lyra followed. Ronan moved beside her. Kalira's eyes cut to him. "You should remain with your court, Majesty. Let the mute girl play forest queen alone." Lyra stopped. The word mute no longer belonged to Kalira. Not anymore. Lyra turned and spoke, her voice rough but steady. "I was silent. I was never empty." The trees bowed. Ronan looked at her, and something in his face changed. Not tenderness, not yet, but respect sharp enough to cut through years of royal distance. They entered the blood forest. The red mist closed behind them, leaving the court at the gate. Only Ronan, Lyra, Kalira, the spirits of Kael and the old king, and the roots dragging the royal healer went deeper beneath the black trees. The farther they walked, the more the forest changed. The red leaves faded to silver, then to bone white. The ground softened beneath Lyra's feet, not with mud, but with ash. Names were carved into every trunk. Some had been scratched by hands, some burned by magic, some formed naturally in the bark like wounds that had learned letters. Lyra touched one. A woman's voice whispered. "He said I ran. I was buried under his house." Another tree whispered, "I healed his child, and he called me witch." Another, "My brother sold my silence for a council seat." Lyra pulled her hand away, trembling. Ronan saw it. "Too much?" "Yes," she said. He did not pretend strength could fix it. He only slowed his steps to match hers. At last, the forest opened into a clearing. The first tree stood at its center. It was enormous, black and silver. Its roots spread like the ribs of a buried god. Its trunk had been split open long ago. Inside the split beat a heart made of wood, blood, and moonlight. Around the tree's base lay crowns. Not one, dozens. Wolf crowns, healer circlets, noble rings, priestess chains, all half swallowed by roots. Ronan's father lowered his head. This is where the first alpha made the first bargain. Ronan turned to him. What bargain? The old king's spirit looked ashamed. A king wanted peace. A healer wanted truth. The forest agreed to hold the dead until the living were brave enough to name them. Kael looked at Kalira. And your line turned witness into threat. Kalira's jaw tightened. My line saved the throne from being ruled by ghosts. Lyra stepped toward the first tree. The scar on her throat burned. The tree opened wider. Inside, she saw a memory. Centuries ago, a woman knelt before the first tree with blood on her hands. Not guilty blood, healing blood. Around her stood wolves, kings, widows, servants, soldiers, everyone who had lost someone to secret power. The woman spoke one vow. No death will vanish if the forest remembers. Then a young alpha placed his crown at the tree's roots. Not above her, beside her. Lyra's breath caught. The first healer had not served the first king. They had ruled as witnesses together. The memory shifted. Generations later, Kalira's ancestor stood before the same tree with a black blade. If healers hold truth, she said, kings become weak. If the forest speaks freely, courts become graves. She drove the blade into the first tree. The tree screamed. From that wound came the blood forest. Red leaves, hungry roots. Truth turned into vengeance. The vision vanished. Lyra looked at Kalira. Your family wounded it. Kalira's lips trembled, but she lifted her chin. Because truth without control destroys kingdoms. No, Ronan said. Control without truth does. Kalira turned on him. You think this girl will save you? She will make your court kneel to every corpse beneath the soil. She will make you apologize until there is no throne left to sit on. Ronan looked at the crowns half buried in the roots. Then at Lyra. Then perhaps the throne should stand only if it can bear the names beneath it. The first tree pulsed. Kalira screamed as the roots dragged her to the split trunk. Not into it. Before it, the forest did not want her blood. It wanted her voice. Lyra understood. She must name the first lie. Kalira spat at her feet. I will name nothing. The roots tightened. Koira goshped. Lyra stepped closer. You stole my voice because you feared what I might say. I stole it because you were born with the forest inside your throat. My mother was worse. Kalira's face twisted. She could make kings confess in their sleep. She could touch a grave and wake every crime buried above it. If she had lived, no council, no noble house, no alpha line would have survived untouched. Lyra's eyes burned. So you killed her. I silenced a future rebellion. No, Lyra whispered. You murdered a healer. The first tree shook. Roots rose around Kalira's throat. Still, she smiled. If I speak, the tree will know everything. Not only what I buried, what your mother buried too. Lyra went still. Ronan's gaze sharpened. Kalira saw the wound open and drove deeper. Ask the forest why your mother sealed your voice before I took it. Ask why she hid your true name. Ask why the trees did not speak it until tonight. Lyra stepped back. The forest fell silent. For the first time, even her mother's spirit did not answer. Ronan moved closer. Lyra. She looked at him, suddenly afraid of the truth she had fought to free. The first tree opened its wooden heart. Inside lay a cradle woven from roots. Empty. Above it, carved in silver bark, was a name Lyra had never seen. Note, Lyra Vale. Lyrastra crown root. The forest whispered. Not daughter of the healer. Daughter of the vow. The name carved inside the first tree was not Lyra Vale. Lyrastra crown root. The forest spoke it like thunder buried under soil. Not daughter of the healer. Daughter of the vow. Lyra stepped back from the root cradle, her newly returned voice trapped behind pain again. The clearing seemed to tilt around her. Ronan moved closer, but did not touch her. Kalira smiled through the roots binding her throat. There, she whispered. Now ask why your mother lied. Lyra looked toward the spirit of the woman in healer's white, the woman she had believed was her mother. The spirit stood beneath the bone-white leaves, sorrow shining through her hollow eyes. Tell me, Lyra said. The spirit bowed her head. I was not your mother by blood. The words struck Lyra harder than any blade. Ronan's face tightened. The forest around them went still. The healer's spirit stepped toward her, roots trailing through the hem of her ruined robes. I found you in this cradle the night the first tree stopped breathing. You were not crying. You were listening. Every root in the forest bent toward you. Every buried name tried to enter your mouth. Lyra's hand rose to the scar on her throat. The spirit's voice trembled through the leaves. I sealed your true name first, not to erase you, to keep the forest from using a child as its only voice. Kalira laughed bitterly. How noble. She hid a weapon and called it mercy. The spirit turned on her. You found us anyway. A vision opened inside the first tree. Lyra saw herself as a child, wrapped in gray cloth inside the root cradle. The healer lifted her carefully, tears on her face. Then Kalira appeared between the trees, younger, beautiful, already cruel with certainty. That child belongs to the forest, Kalira said. The healer held Lyra closer. No child belongs to hunger. She will make kings kneel. She will make graves speak. Same thing. The vision shifted. Kalira's blade flashed. The healer fell. Little Lyra screamed. Before Kalira could seize her, the dying healer pressed bloody fingers to Lyra's throat and whispered, hide deep, live first, speak later. Then Kalira sealed the wound with blackthorn. Lyra's scream vanished. The vision shattered. Lyra stood shaking before the first tree. The woman she had mourned as mother had not birthed her. She had chosen her, saved her, lost her life for her. That grief was not smaller. It was sharper. Lyra looked at Kalira. You took my voice after she gave her life to protect it. Kalira's eyes were bright. I protected the kingdom from what you are. What am I? The first tree answered. The vow made flesh. The roots opened wider around the cradle. Beneath it, silver light revealed the first bargain. Not a crown, not a throne, but a promise between healer and alpha. No ruler above witness. No death without name. No forest without mercy. Ronan read the words, and something changed in his face. His father's spirit lowered his head. Kael's spirit did the same. Lyra understood then. She was not born to rule the forest. She was born because the vow had been broken too many times. A living answer. A living accusation. Kalira whispered, if she speaks her full name, the first tree will bind every crown in Veilhold to witness law again. No alpha will condemn without the dead hearing. No council will bury prisoners quietly. No healer will hold secret power over the throne. Ronan looked at her. Good. Kalira turned on him. You fool. You think that sounds righteous because you are ashamed. But shame is not governance. You will give a forest the right to challenge your crown. Ronan's gaze moved to Lyra. Not with fear, with decision. If my crown cannot survive being challenged by the dead, it should not survive. The first tree pulsed. Lyra's throat burned. The full name inside the bark began to glow. Lyrastra Crownroot. The forest waited for her to speak it. So did Kalira. Too eagerly. Lyra saw it. You want me to say it. Kalira's smile faded. Ronan turned sharply. Why? Lyra looked at the root cradle. Because if I bind the crown while I am afraid, the forest will bind through fear. The first tree trembled. Kalira's silence confirmed it. Lyra stepped closer to her. That was your final trap. Kalira's face twisted. I gave you back your destiny. No, Lyra said. You tried to turn my wound into a leash. The roots around Kalira tightened. For the first time, she gasped. The forest wanted punishment. Lyra felt it. The hunger, the rage, every buried voice pressing against her tongue, begging to use Kalira's body as the first offering of the restored vow. Ronan stepped beside Lyra. She murdered your mother, he said quietly. I know. She murdered my brother. I know. She poisoned the air. I know. His voice roughened. I will not stop you if you choose blood. Lyra looked at him. That almost broke her. Because the old Ronan would have commanded restraint for the throne. This Ronan gave her the truth of her choice, even when rage lived in him too. Lyra turned back to Kalira. I want you dead, she said. Kalira's eyes widened. The forest leaned in. Lyra's voice shook. But I will not make the first tree remember me first as hunger. The roots stopped. She faced the silver cradle and placed both hands on the living bark. "I am Nerissa Vale," she said, "chosen daughter of the healer who died protecting me." The forest shivered. "I am Larastra Crownroot," she continued, voice breaking but clear. "Daughter of the vow. Not a weapon, not a queen of graves, not the forest's mouth alone. The first tree opened in silver fire. I bind witness to the living, not vengeance to the dead." The clearing exploded with light. Roots shot through the ground toward Valehold, but they did not tear walls down. They wrapped around court stones, council doors, prison gates, healing chambers, and royal seals, not destroying, marking. Ronan fell to one knee as silver roots circled his crown, not forced down, choosing not to stand above it. "I, Ronan Vale," he said, voice carrying through the forest and back to the court, "submit my crown to witness." The blood forest answered. Every buried name became a star among the leaves. Kalira screamed as the roots pulled her before the first tree. Not into death, into memory. Bark opened behind her, like a prison made of living truth. Lyra stepped close. "You will not be buried. You will be heard." Kalira shook her head, panic breaking her face. "No. Yes," Lyra whispered. "Every person you silenced will speak through you until the last name is restored." The first tree took Kalira into its hollow. Her scream became 1,000 voices. Then silence. Not empty silence. Waiting silence. The forest bowed to Lyra. Ronan rose slowly beside her. For one breath, they stood together beneath bone-white leaves while the first dawn touched the blood forest. Then Kael's spirit turned toward the east. It is not over. The ground beneath Valehold trembled again. Far below the palace, beneath the old throne, another root heart began to beat. Ronan's father went pale. "The king root," he whispered. Lyra looked toward the palace as silver light spread under its walls. The first tree had awakened the throne. The throne beneath Valehold began to beat like a second heart. The sound rose through stone. Slow, deep, wrong. Every wolf in the court felt it before anyone understood it. Nobles froze with names still on their tongues. Guards stepped away from the palace walls. Servants clutched one another beneath the red dawn. Across the courtyard, silver roots had marked every door that had ever hidden a death. Then the old throne cracked. A thin line of red light split the black stone seat where Alpha Kings had ruled for generations. Ronan stood beside Lyra at the edge of the blood forest, his crown circled by living silver roots, his face pale beneath the weight of what his father had just said. "The king root," he repeated. His father's spirit would not meet his eyes. Kael's spirit looked toward the palace with grief sharp enough to cut through the mist. "It is where the first Alpha buried what he did not want the first tree to remember." Lyra's throat tightened. The first tree had awakened witness. Now the throne was answering with whatever kings had hidden from witness. Ronan turned to his father. "What is under my throne?" The old king closed his eyes. The first betrayal. The palace shook. From beneath the throne room came a sound like roots scraping bone. Then a voice rose through the court. Not Kelraz. Not the forests. A man's voice, ancient and cold. "No crown kneels forever." The silver roots around Ronan's crown tightened. Lyra stepped toward him. He lifted one hand, not stopping her, warning her. The black doors of the throne hall burst open. Red roots flooded down the steps, darker than blood, thicker than serpents. They did not strike the court. They moved around nobles, guards, and servants, searching only for the royal line. For Ronan, his wolf shadow snarled at his feet, newly freed from Blackthorn but still weak. The red roots surged toward it. Lyra spoke. "Wait." The silver roots of the first tree rose to block them. Red and silver collided in the courtyard. The impact threw everyone back. Ronan caught Lyra by the arm before she fell. His grip was firm, then instantly careful. She looked at his hand. He released her. Even now, even with the throne coming alive to claim him, that mattered. The old king's spirit stepped forward. The king root was made when the first Alpha broke the vow. He wanted witness for enemies, not kings. He asked the forest to remember crimes committed against the throne, but not crimes committed by it. Lyra stared at him. "And the forest agreed?" "No." His voice broke. The throne stole a root from the first tree and chained it beneath the crown. Ronan's face hardened. So every alpha after him ruled over a stolen heart. Yes, the red roots rose higher. The ancient voice spoke again. The crown is above witness. Ronan looked toward the cracked throne hall. For one moment, Lyra saw the old struggle in him. Not cowardice, training. A lifetime of being taught that a king must stand above pain or drown beneath it. Then he removed his crown. The court gasped. Ronan held it in both hands and walked toward the palace steps. Lyra moved beside him. He glanced at her. "You do not have to come. I know. You may die. So may you." His mouth almost moved into something like a smile. Almost. Then the red roots attacked. They wrapped around Ronan's arms, dragging the crown toward the throne hall. His wolf shadow lunged, but the roots pierced through it, and Ronan dropped to one knee with a strangled breath. Lyra reached for him. The roots struck her throat. Not to choke, to silence. Her scar burned. Her voice flickered. The ancient root knew exactly where Kalira had wounded her. Ronan saw it, and rage flared in his eyes. "Let her go." The red roots pulled tighter. The throne voice answered. "Witness has no place above kings." Lyra forced her hand around the root at her throat. Pain split through her. For one terrifying heartbeat, she was a child again, soundless and bleeding, Kalira's hand sealing away her scream. Then she felt the first tree behind her. Not commanding, waiting. Lyra stopped fighting the root. She listened. Inside the king root was not only arrogance, there was fear. Centuries of kings afraid that if they were judged, the realm would fall. Fathers teaching sons to bury truth. Sons becoming kings before they learned how to grieve. Crowns mistaking silence for survival. Ronan's pain lived there too. His forgotten brother, his murdered father, his dying wolf, his own guilt for sending her into the forest. Lyra opened her mouth. At first, no sound came. Then Ronan spoke from his knees. "Her voice stands beside my crown." The red roots froze. The court heard him. So did the throne. Ronan lifted the crown, though roots tore at his wrists. "I, Ronan Vale, last crowned alpha of this broken line, refuse the old bargain." The palace shook harder. He turned to the court. "I was taught a king must choose which truths can survive. That lie made me condemn an innocent healer. It made me forget my brother. It made me kneel to silence and call it rule." His voice roughened. "Never again." He placed the crown on the broken stone before Lyra. Not at her feet. Between them, the red roots screamed. Lyra felt the root leave her throat. She stepped forward, voice shaking but alive. "I do not take your crown." The silver roots of the first tree rose behind her. "I do not rule your dead." The red roots recoiled. "I name the first betrayal." The crown stole witness from the forest and used silence as law. The throne hall split open. Beneath the black stone, a huge red root heart pulsed inside iron chains. Hundreds of tiny mouths were carved into its bark, all sealed shut with royal wax. Lyra walked toward it. Ronan stood beside her. Together, they placed one hand on the chains. Ronan spoke first. "The crown confesses." Lyra followed. "The forest witnesses." The chains broke. The king root did not explode. It exhaled. Every sealed mouth in its bark opened, not screaming, but breathing for the first time in centuries. Red light turned silver. The stolen root heart sank downward, through stone, through soil, back toward the first tree. The old throne collapsed into ash. The court stood silent. No seat, no symbol, no lie to hide behind. Ronan looked at the empty place where his throne had been. Then he turned to Lyra. "Valehold will need a new law." Lyra's throat hurt. Her body shook. But her voice was hers. "Not law first," she said. He waited. "Names first." Ronan bowed his head. Behind them, the spirits of his father and Kael began to fade, their faces softened by release. Kael looked at Lyra once and smiled. "Do not let him become stone again." Lyra glanced at Ronan. "He can decide that himself." Kael laughed softly, then vanished into silver leaves. Ronan's father touched his son's shoulder one final time. "Rule where witness can reach you." Then he too was gone. Dawn broke fully over Valehold. The blood forest no longer pressed against the walls like a monster. It stood watching, waiting, and beneath every stone in the kingdom, the dead began whispering their names. The throne was gone. For the first time in Valehold's history, the Alpha King had nowhere to sit above the people he ruled. Only broken black stone remained in the throne hall, split open where the king root had been chained for centuries. Silver roots now threaded through the cracks, not as weapons, but as reminders. Every sealed door in the palace bore the mark of the first tree. Every council chamber, healing room, prison stair, and servant hall pulsed faintly with names waiting to be spoken. The court did not cheer. Truth had not made them joyful. It had made them exposed. Lyra stood where the throne had fallen, one hand at her throat. Her voice hurt each time she breathed. It felt raw, newly born, and dangerous. She had spent most of her life without sound, and now every person in the hall waited for her to speak, as if her words could decide whether the kingdom lived or cracked apart. She hated that. Ronan noticed. Of course he did now. The man who had not truly seen her when she knelt, condemned at the gate, now watched every tremor in her hands. He stepped forward, but not too close. You do not have to speak for all of them. Lyra looked at him. Then make them speak. Ronan turned to the court. No crown sat on his head. No throne stood behind him. His black armor was torn, his arms stained from Kalira's poison, his wolf shadow weak but alive at his feet. Still, when he spoke, every wolf listened. Open the lower records. A council lord flinched. Your Majesty, without the throne seal, the records are not legally. Ronan's gaze cut to him. The man stopped. Open them, Ronan said, or confess that what you fear is not disorder, but being named. The records were brought before dawn, not by council hands, by servants. That mattered. Scrolls were dragged from hidden shelves. Grave ledgers came from beneath healing chambers. Prison lists were pulled from wall cavities. Names appeared in ink, ash, blood, and root mark. Some belonged to people the court had called deserters, some to healers accused of failure, some to women declared mad after they witnessed noble deaths, some to children who vanished when their bloodline became inconvenient. Ronan ordered every name read aloud. Not all at once, not through Lyra, one, by the houses that had buried them. Lord Fenric read his son's name first. Alden Fenric, he said, voice breaking. Poisoned by blackthorn root, blamed on Lyra Vale, hidden by Lady Kalira Voss and those who signed silence. Then he looked at Lyra. No apology could bring back what had been done. He knew that, so he lowered his head and kept reading. Others followed. A kitchen maid named the servants who vanished after seeing Kalira carry roots into the healing wing. A guard named Patrol Wolves buried under false desertion. A noblewoman named her sister, who had discovered the Blood Forest bargain and been called fever mad. With every name, the silver roots in the walls brightened. With every confession, the forest outside grew stiller. Kalira was brought in bound in living root, her body held upright by the first tree's mark. She was no longer beautiful in the way the court had trusted. Her healer's robes were torn, her mouth was pale, her eyes still burned with hatred. You think this is justice? She whispered as the names rose around her. This is a kingdom unmaking itself. Lyra stepped toward her. The hall went quiet. Lyra's voice came rough. No. This is a kingdom hearing itself for the first time. Kalira smiled faintly. And me? Ronan's hand tightened around his sword. Lyra saw it. His father, his brother, his dying wolf, her stolen voice, her murdered chosen mother, Alden, the dead wolves, the hidden graves. So many reasons for blood. The blood forest waited. Lyra could feel it. If she asked, the roots would take Kalira below, and no one would stop them. She wanted to ask. That frightened her, so she did not. You will not die today, Lyra said. Kalira's smile vanished. You will stand before every family you silenced. You will hear every name. You will answer every question. And when your own voice breaks, the first tree will hold you upright until the last truth is spoken. Kalira's face went white. Death had not scared her. Witness did. Ronan looked at Lyra then, and something in his eyes changed. Not desire, not relief, not the easy softness of a man forgiven too soon. Respect, deep enough to hurt. When the first light of morning entered the ruined throne hall, Ronan walked to the broken crown lying on the stone. The silver roots had wrapped around it, not crushing it, only holding it still. He lifted it. The court stiffened. Lyra did too, but Ronan did not put it on. He carried it to the eastern doors, where the blood forest could be seen beyond the open gate. Red leaves turned silver by dawn. Then he set the crown on the ground between palace stone and forest root. "I will not wear this again until Valehold has named its dead," he said. The court gasped. A border lord stepped forward. "Without a crowned alpha, the houses will challenge you." Ronan looked at him. "Then they will challenge a man standing in witness, not a king hiding behind stone." The lord had no answer. Ronan turned to Lyra. The whole court turned with him. She hated that too. Ronan seemed to understand, because he did not kneel. He did not offer a crown. He did not ask her to become Luna before people who had nearly watched her die. He only said, "The healing ward will be yours to rebuild if you choose it. Not because the forest named you, not because my crown needs you, because the people I failed will need a healer who cannot be silenced by law again." Lyra's throat tightened. "You still speak like a king giving gifts." Pain crossed his face. "Good. Let him feel it." Then he bowed his head. "Then tell me how to say it." The room stilled. Lyra looked at the man who had understood her hands and looked away. The man who had followed her into the forest too late. The man who had named his brother, broken his throne, and still had so far to go. She said, "Ask." Ronan lifted his eyes. "Lyra Vale," he said carefully, "will you help rebuild what I helped break?" It was not enough. Not nearly. But it was the first honest shape of repair. Lyra looked past him to the eastern gate. Her chosen mother's skeleton no longer stood in the hollow tree. Red leaves drifted where the body had been, and among them, one silver root crown rested empty at the trunk's base. The forest had released her. Lyra closed her eyes. For the first time, silence did not feel like theft. It felt like choice. When she opened them, she looked at Ronan. "I will help the dead be named," she said. "I will help the living heal. I will not belong to your crown." Ronan bowed his head. "I know. I may never forgive you. I know. If you become stone again, I will remind the forest where you stand." A faint, wounded breath left him. Almost laughter. Almost grief. "I would deserve that." Lyra walked past him toward the open eastern gate. The court parted. Not because she commanded them. Because every root beneath the palace knew her name now, and every person there knew what had happened the last time they mistook silence for weakness. At the threshold, Ronan followed. One step behind. She noticed. Did not stop him. Outside, the blood forest shimmered beneath dawn, no longer red with hunger, but silver with memory. The trees bowed as Lyra approached, not to a queen, not to a weapon, not to a girl made holy by suffering. To a voice returned. Lyra placed one hand on the first tree's nearest root and spoke the first name of the new law. "Mother." The forest answered with leaves like rain. Behind her, Ronan stood without his crown. Beside her, the dead whispered no longer for vengeance, but for witness. And Lyra, the silent healer they had sent to die, finally understood that her voice had not been given back so she could scream. It had returned, so no one buried beneath Valehold would ever have to scream alone again.